All right, it is 9 o'clock, so I will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the fire briefing for Sunday, July 6th. I'm Rachel. I'm here for the Spokane side today, and Matthew's on for the Seattle side. Just for the daily disclosure, this meeting is being recorded. By joining and participating in the session, consent is being given to the recording. Please keep cameras off per NOAA Privacy Act statements. Taking a look at the current satellite, pretty clear skies out there, just a few high clouds moving down from the north. Looking at the 24-hour precipitation, we did get a few hundredths of an inch of rain in eastern Washington and North Idaho yesterday morning, with some showers that were wrapping around a low pressure system and lingering for a few hours there. Moving on to the matrix, we do have some elevated to critical fire weather conditions expected next week. I will start off with Western Washington and hand it over to Matthew.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so for the next couple of days, really Monday and Tuesday, we're highlighting some elevated concerns, and really that's with the low RHs, the warm and dry conditions with that ridge in place. We'll see things bottom out, in the driest spots around 25 to 30% RH each of those afternoons. But fortunately, a nice push on Wednesday will bring higher humidity, clouds, cooler temperatures, and even some rain chances, which we'll talk about more later. It does look like a brief pause, though, because we will be right back to where we are later in the week with potentially even warmer and drier conditions Friday onward into the weekend. So for now, the focus will just be for those, the finer fuels that may be more receptive for Monday and Tuesday, and then fortunately a nice little push to break up the week there. Over to you.
All right, thanks, Matthew. So Monday is when we'll start to see a warming and drying trend. RHs will be falling into the lower teens to around 10% on Monday, but not expecting any winds to start off the week. And then Tuesday is when things will get warmer, drier, and breezy. Tuesday will be our warmest day of the week with highs in the upper 90s to just over 100 degrees in the warmest spots. Those RHs will still be around 10% to in the lower teens, and winds will start to pick up in central Washington and down the Okanagan Valley, creating some fire weather concerns. And then Wednesday, winds will pick up even further as our next weather system moves in. Things will start to cool down, but those winds will be gusting up to 30-mile-per-hour range. And we are also monitoring a threat for some isolated dry thunderstorms in the southeast Washington, and then later in the afternoon in northern Washington and North Idaho up along the Canadian border. So that is looking like our primary concerning day. And Friday and Saturday, it looks like we'll get a brief break on Thursday, then things will warm up and dry back out to finish off the week. So just to show where our main concerns are for Tuesday afternoon and evening, we'll start to see some winds pick up ahead of the midweek weather system moving in. Relative humidity values will be 10 to 20% for the areas highlighted here. And wind out of the west, 10 to 20 miles an hour, with gusts 25 to 35 miles an hour. A little bit less breezy down in central Washington, but still breezy enough for elevated fire weather concerns. And then Wednesday, we are less concerned about relative humidities. As the system moves in, those humidities will increase a little bit. But the main thing with Wednesday is the wind. Winds will pick up further on Wednesday, staying 15 to 30 miles an hour out of the west, gusts 35 to 45. And that threat will be over a larger area than on Tuesday. It'll be more region wide. In addition, for any new and existing fires that are going by Wednesday, the winds are expected to shift from the west, more out of the northwest, maybe even straight north, late Wednesday with a dry cold front passage. So that'll be something to look out for anyone fighting fires out there. And then moving on to weather conditions. So taking a look at maximum temperatures today, we've got upper 70s to low 80s for the west side, and then upper 80s to just above 90 for eastern Washington. And then min RHs for today, west sides in the 40s to around 50%, and then east side is upper teens to mid 20s, a little bit higher in the Idaho Panhandle. Taking a look at winds, I know this is a little hard to see, but generally pretty light winds today. Gusts in the teens across the states out of the west. And showing day 2 here, things start to warm up into the low to mid 90s for eastern Washington, and then in the 80s for western Washington. And RHs will drop. Those will be in the teens for the east side, 40s for the west side. Day 3, this is Tuesday. That'll be our warmest day of the week on the east side, with highs in the upper 90s to several readings over 100 there. And then well into the 80s for western Washington. Min RHs will be very low on Tuesday, 10 to 20% for the east side. And winds, we'll start to see some concerns with winds Tuesday afternoon and evening. We see sustained in the teens out of the west to southwest, and then gusts in the 20s to looks like 30s for Ellensburg, also out of the west to southwest. And Wednesday, our primary fire weather concern day. Things will be a little bit cooler as that weather system moves in, and RHs will be a little higher, but winds will pick up. We see pretty strong winds here out of the west, southwest, sustained in the 20s for that basin area, and then gusts into the 30s for a lot of eastern Washington, 20s for North Idaho. Also wanted to show for Wednesday, chance of wetting rain. This is more on the west side, so I will pass it over to Matthew to elaborate on.
Yeah, thanks. So for this, really just wanted to show that, while the rain chances are pretty widespread for a lot of areas, we may see a few hundredths or maybe even a tenth in some spots, but the chance of a wetting rain is about 20 to 25% in the North Cascades. So certainly that's showing the depth of the marine push and how much of a cool down we're going to see, and also some of this moisture around. So good news, and putting a pause on things after our warm days to start the week, and giving us a little bit of a break before we get into the end of the week. But again, it looks like very few locations have much of a chance of seeing, say, a half an inch. So the totals are on the high end, are right at that wetting rain threshold, and certainly many areas will not see that, especially as you get to the south or southwest. That's all I want to say there.
All right, thank you. And then for the east side here, I wanted to show prob thunder For Wednesday, notice we didn't really have a whole lot of chances of letting rain on the east side, but we do have some prob thunder. So primary concern is going to be Wednesday afternoon and evening along the Canadian border. And then Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, kind of as our weather system moves up from the south and toward the north, we'll see some chances for thunder over the southeast corner of the region. So we'll keep monitoring that. And then moving on to trends, I will start off with the west side. Go to Josemine, pass it back to Matthew.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, so went with the North Cascades today to kind of show the trends here, and they'll bear out the same up and down the Cascades. But looking at the warmer and drier conditions progressively, so Monday, Tuesday, looks like each of those days we're seeing the RHs bottom out in the Cascade valleys. They're about 25%. Especially, it looks like Monday will be the driest, maybe a little bit of extra moisture on Tuesday versus Monday, but by and large they're going to be pretty similar. But then as we get into the midweek period, you see the temperature trace drops way down and the moisture comes way up. And that's going to be that big marine push that comes in, a lot of cloud cover coming in, and maybe even, as we mentioned, up in the north, perhaps even a wetting rain out of it. But that is short-lived. As we get into the later part of the week, we see those RHs bottoming out pretty much where they are at the start of the week. So down in that 25 to 30% range as we get into really Friday, Saturday, and perhaps even Sunday down there. So fortunately, there's an onshore component to the winds, and we're seeing that up and down the Cascade. So that keeps us, from getting into a more elevated or critical type of situation. But by and large, the start and the end of the week look pretty similar. Those are the warmest and driest days with that little break in the middle.
All right. Thanks, Matthew. And then for Eastern Washington, I'll show the Douglas station here. We'll see things start to warm up through the beginning of the week. Highs in the 90s, low 90s on Monday, and then rising into the mid 90s for Tuesday, and RHs bottoming out 13 to 14% there. And then things cool down Wednesday, but we see Tuesday the winds start to spike up out of the west around 20 miles an hour, and then Wednesday afternoon they spike even further into the upper 20s, near 30s, and it's a little bit subtle at this station, but we can see kind of Wednesday afternoon the winds start to shift from west to northwest. So that'll be something to look out for. And then for Idaho, I wanted to show Priest Lake. Similar trends for Idaho, but generally lighter winds and a little bit higher RHs. Monday, temperatures in the upper 80s. Tuesday, low 90s. RHs bottoming out in the mid-teens, recovering to around between 60 and 70% Tuesday, Wednesday. And then we see the same spikes in the wind here Tuesday, around 10 miles an hour out of the southwest, calming down overnight. And then Wednesday afternoon, into the mid-teens out of the southwest, gradually shifting west and then northwest Wednesday night into Thursday. Then for the extended outlook, 8 to 14 day, we see kind of a range of things across the region, near to above normal for Eastern Washington and North Idaho, and then below normal for Northwestern Washington here, and then generally above normal precipitation across the region. And I think that is all for today. As always, you can find the recording of this briefing and take a closer look at any of the graphics on our fire weather dashboard at the link shown here. So I will go ahead and stop the recording.